we've entered the section of Isaiah 40 through 44. And it's important to note in this section that we're speaking to a different historical context of Israel. It's Israel under captivity. It's Israel under the prison camps of Babylon initially. That happened around 586 and around that time frame. But it's also any time in Israel's history when they're in captivity. It could have been after the Romans destroyed it in 70 AD. And again, when the Antichrist comes and puts many in prison camps, and many are refugees or outcasts dispersed throughout Gentile nations, hiding or looking for places of refuge. It's that type of setting, and the Lord addresses the nation there, and He addresses them to give them hope. We come across not only the forerunner call of God preparing the way for His return in this chapter 40, but also towards the end of 40, we see something come out of the nation of Israel, and it's basically, God, where are you? Why aren't you acknowledging my calling? Why don't you acknowledge my voice? Isaiah 40, verse 27, it says, "Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my just claim is passed over by my God." This is an accusation towards God that Israel's had throughout history, and it'll happen again under the oppression of the Antichrist. And the Lord gives the answer to them, really in several ways. First, in Isaiah 40, He talks about His sovereignty and His tenderness. His sovereignty in that He sits above the circle of the earth. He's so powerful. The inhabitants of the earth are like grasshoppers, and He can measure the waters of the earth in His hand. He's just so powerful. He certainly can be powerful enough to care for Israel and to withstand any enemy. And He's unlike any idol. In this section, Isaiah 40 through 44, it really highlights the futility of worshiping idols. They can't see, they can't hear, they can't predict the future. But the Lord not only knows the future, He's causing the future to happen, to bring Israel back to Himself. And so He answers Israel with that, saying, "Know me, wait on me. Wait on me and renew your strength, and I'll help you rise up on wings like eagles." And so the Lord, this section's helpful for us as believers to know the despondency Israel will feel, and I think many Christians will feel in the Great Tribulation. But as we connected to the Lord and connected to what He's saying in His sovereignty, we'll be inspired by hope. We're supposed to know this to be able to speak this to Israel. And now as we continue on in this section, Isaiah 40 through 44, God also answers this despondency by saying, "I'm going to raise up a political deliverer for you. I'm going to raise up Cyrus," chapter 40 and 44. God actually calls a Gentile king to deliver Israel, and He names him by name 150 years before he was ever born. I love this about prophetic literature, the accuracy of it. And so God calls him, and then another way He answers Israel by saying, "Hey, you're not going to be in Babylon forever. I'm going to cause a Persian king named Cyrus to deliver you. He's going to rebuild Jerusalem, and he's going to rebuild the city." And Cyrus is kind of like a Christ figure. When Christ returns, He's going to rebuild the city, He's going to rebuild the temple, and He will restore the fortunes of Israel. But also God answers Israel in another way with this despondency. And He shows us a picture of another deliverer in this section. This deliverer is in Isaiah 42. And this deliverer is called the servant. And we see 4 distinct songs regarding the servant in Isaiah 42, 49, 50, and 53. 42 is the first appearance of this servant. He's appearing to serve Yahweh's purposes in bringing justice to Israel, but justice to the nations. And Yahweh takes great delight in him. That same delight that the Lord said in Matthew 3:17, "You are my son, and I'm well pleased with you." We know this is Jesus. And He's coming in meekness, but later on in the chapter, He's coming as a mighty warrior, not holding His peace, and vanquishing Israel's enemies to establish justice in Israel. He's going to remove the blindness off Israel, so Israel himself can serve the Lord as a servant. Because not only is this person called the servant, Israel's called a servant, but Israel can't serve Yahweh. Israel's blind in their own sin, just like we all have been apart from Christ. But the Lord in His mercy is going to use Jesus to return Israel back to be able to serve Yahweh in the future as a kingdom of priests on the earth, to release the knowledge of His name and release justice on the earth with Him. And so Isaiah 40 through 44 has some great features. God answering the despondency of Israel. God's the one that raises up deliverers. He's going to return Jesus as the mighty servant and warrior king of Isaiah 42. He's going to show the futility of worshiping idols when He crushes the Antichrist and the abomination of desolation. And he also is going to deliver the Jewish people out of Babylon. Isaiah 43 shows that God's calling them out of Babylon. And so this section is just phenomenal, and it shows God's power, His deliverance, and how He's going to care for the Jewish people in captivity, and when He brings them out of captivity, His tenderness to them, and it's the same God we serve, His tenderness towards us.